Did you know that there are 5 licks that explain 99% of jazz guitar? Most jazz beginners get stuck with endless scales and arpeggios, but never learn to play solos that actually sound like jazz. I studied lines from legends like Wes Montgomery and Joe Pass and distilled this into 5 licks that break down how jazz solos flow and feel. And in this video, I'm gonna show you the 5 licks so that your playing finally nails that classic jazz sound. Did you ever play a solo and feel like you were just skating over the surface, not really logging in with the song? Now that's because jazz, and especially bebop, is full of fast-moving chord changes, and the magic only happens when your lines actually connect to those changes. Think of each chord change like a scheduled stop for a delivery driver. If your solo hits the right note when the chord changes, you can check it off. And that's exactly what is happening in lick number 1. The way this lick connects to the chord is by using a lot of chord tones and especially hitting those chord tones on the heavy beats so that we really hear how they fit with the chord just at the right time. So listen for how the lick lands on a chord tone when the chord changes. Here, it's pretty clear that this is when the chord changes, and I'm really using sort of the clearest chord tone that we have, the third. So you have the F on D minor 7, the B on G7, and of course the E on C major 7. These notes are like musical signposts spelling out the harmony and making your solo feel glued to the progression. Most of the other notes are also from the chord, which of course also really helps lock in everything. When you practice, try building your own lines that put chord tones, especially the third and the fifth, right on beat 1 of each chord. Spend some time doing this slowly, even rubato, as if you're composing lines. You'll notice that your solos instantly sound more connected and start to flow through the changes like real jazz. Let's move on to the most important chord progression in jazz and the material that you'll need to create strong lines over it. The 2-5-1 progression is the backbone of jazz. You'll hear it everywhere, from classic standards to modern tunes. In the key of C major, that is this set of chords. D minor 7 to G7, to C major 7. To make it easy to solo over the chords, it's essential to know the notes in each chord, the chord tones or arpeggios. These notes serve as the framework for the music, guiding your solo lines so that they sound connected and intentional. Here's a practical way to build this skill. Practice playing the arpeggios for each chord all in one position on the neck. That keeps your lines flowing without having to jump around the fretboard. Working in one position helps your fingers and your ears easily make melodies that flow smoothly from chord to chord. Once this feels comfortable, you'll be ready to turn those arpeggios into strong melodic jazz lines that really nail the changes. Next, I'm gonna show you how to get that flow into your solos. If you want your solos to sound like real jazz, not just a string of random notes, you need more than just hitting the right chord tones. Your lines need energy and direction, especially when going from chord to chord. It's like writing a story. You wouldn't scatter sentences randomly across a page. Each one follows the last, creating meaning. In jazz, each chord is like the next sentence in your story, and your lines need to connect them smoothly. And that's where target notes come in, usually a strong note in the next chord, very often the third. Targeting these notes gives your solo real forward motion, making every phrase feel like it's really going somewhere. Just jumping from chord tone to chord tone still sounds random and pointless. What you want is a melody that leads the ear from one chord to the next, like this. Check out how the descending line on D minor 7 heads straight for that B on G7. And then on G7 you get sort of a small melodic twist before a phrase landing on the E, the third of C major 7. Every phrase is aiming for a destination here. Here's how to practice this. Try composing your own lines, deliberately aiming for a specific target note like the third on each new chord. Do this over and over and you'll start to hear how real jazz melodies are built. In fact, you will probably start to recognize this in the solos that you listen to. Now soon this sense of direction will become a natural part of your playing as well. In these examples, I'm aiming for the third of each chord. It is the clearest, strongest note to hit, especially when you're learning, because it really makes the chord change obvious in your solo. Now with this approach, you're not just playing notes, you're really telling a story that moves forward. Now let's explore some more building blocks to take your solos even further. What is the strongest melody in jazz? It's not a famous song or a complicated lick, it's just an arpeggio. Arpeggios are like ready-made melodies that you can drop right into your solos. And the best part, each chord has more than one arpeggio that you can use to create fresh melodic lines. I'm gonna show you that in a bit, but first, check out this lick. Here's what's going on. Over D minor 7, I use the D minor 7 arpeggio. But on G7, I play a B half diminished arpeggio. And that's the arpeggio built from the third of G7. It adds a new flavor, and since it's played as a triplet, it also sort of upgrades the rhythm a bit. Now, a quick bit of science. If you look at a G7 arpeggio and a B half diminished arpeggio, then you'll see that they actually share most of the same notes, and the difference is that the B half diminished adds a ninth on top, giving your line just a little bit of extra color. And you can use the same trick for C major 7. So here you have C major 7, and then the arpeggio from the third is E minor 7, again adding that ninth. So arpeggios aren't just for hitting the right notes, they're a shortcut to stronger, more melodic lines. And once you're comfortable with these, you're ready for the next step, adding a little bit of spice with some wrong notes. Have you noticed how many jazz lines have a few surprising notes here and there? Now that's often thanks to chromatic notes, the notes between the notes of the scale, and they're great for creating tension and making everything a little bit more interesting. Let's explore how to use them. Check out this example. First, let's look at the trickier chromatic phrases, and then we'll get to the easy ones. The first chromatic phrase on the D minor 7 chord is also the longest. It creates tension, really driving the line forward for the next chord. Think of it as circling around the target note before landing on it. In this case, we of course have movement above, so and then below. And here the enclosure leads to B on G7. Making the transition from D minor 7 to G7 even stronger. Now you have an example of a shorter enclosure on the G7 doing the same job. So it's really guiding you smoothly from G7 to C major 7. This specific type is sometimes called diatonic above, chromatic below. Now that might sound complicated, but they are really useful in countless ways in jazz. And diatonic just means a scale note above the chord tone, so that's an F in this case, and then chromatic below is of course that half step below the target note, which here is a D sharp, moving up to an E. Finally, on C major 7, there's a single chromatic passing note, the F sharp, which moves up to the G, the fifth of the chord. Now you don't always need a whole phrase. Sometimes you just add one chromatic note and get a lot of flavor out of it. You can easily start working with this by using chromatic notes and enclosures in your solos, especially targeting chord tones on strong beats. That way they are easier to hear and have a strong, satisfying resolution. But you can experiment with more than just the notes. You can also change the chords. Check out how that opens up even more creative possibilities. You can go further than just making up licks over a chord progression. You can also start improvising with the chords themselves. If your progression is going from D minor 7 to C major 7, you actually have a ton of freedom in how you get there. A simple way to start is by changing the G7 into a G7 flat 9. This adds a bit more tension and helps your lines flow more naturally into the C major 7. Here's what's happening in this lick. First, I'm using the arpeggio from the third over D minor 7, so that's an F major 7 arpeggio. Then going into a short scale run up to the A flat. So the flat 9 of G7, really getting into that sound right away. And over the G7 flat 9, I'm playing a B diminished arpeggio. So this, I'm playing it in an inversion in this case, but really it is just B, D, F and A flat. And that works because it's really just a part of the G7 flat 9 sound. It is the arpeggio from the third. So you have a G7. And then if I take the arpeggio on the B, then you get B diminished. This idea opens many doors. You can take it even further with altered dominance, harmonic minor and diminished scales, but for now, just try out the flat 9 and experiment with diminished arpeggios over the dominant chord. It is a great way to add new colors to your playing without getting overwhelmed with tons of theory. Try it out in your next solo and see how it changes the sound. When it comes to chords, Joe Pass had a simple approach that not only gives you easy to play shapes, but also makes it easy to extend them for chord melody and chord solos. I break that down in this video, and it is hands down the best place to start with jazz chords. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.